Let's talk about choosing a data collection method. Each of you suggested a pro or a con for one of these different techniques. We're going to go through and build up this list. I'll start with interviews. Interviews are good for exploring issues, and semi-structured or unstructured interviews, more information on that later, are often used to elicit scenarios. In the context of establishing requirements, it is equally important for development team members to meet stakeholders and for users to feel involved. This on its own may be sufficient motivation to arrange interviews. So this means that interviews are a good way to connect with different members, different stakeholders that are involved with the team, and they're often flexible ways to get rich data from individuals. So we can list a pro as being adaptable and in-depth, and a con might be you have a small sample, it's time-consuming, and there's limited recall. This means that you can really only access a few people with interviews, and it takes a lot of time to collect a lot of data, as well as analyze it. And people that you are interviewing might have limited recall over their events that you're trying to ask them about. So if they had used an interface, they will only remember some of it. Another variation on talking to people are focus groups. The generic idea of a focus group has been tailored for use within the requirements activity. Each workshop is carefully planned, attendees are carefully chosen, and specific deliverables are produced. So with a focus group, you have multiple people discussing a topic rather than a single interview. Focus groups are good for gaining a consensus view and highlighting areas of conflict and disagreement. On a social level, it also helps for stakeholders to meet designers and each other and express their views in public, similar to an interview but with more people at once. It's not uncommon for one set of stakeholders to be unaware of their understanding of an issue or process that their understanding is different from another's, even if they're in the same organization. So it's really good for that kind of mind share between different people. So you have a pro, you get these multiple perspectives. You get them either, discussing an issue in depth, which can unveil more information than you might find in an interview, and people get to meet these different perspectives. However, it also is a small sample. You can only collect a few people at a time, and it requires very careful planning and facilitation. You want to be very practiced at being able to work with people, because sometimes individuals might be quiet and not want to contribute, or others might dominate the conversation. You also want to make sure you balance the people coming into it, so it does require extra planning. Questionnaires are another method that you probably are familiar with, and they may be used for getting initial responses that can be analyzed to choose people to interview or to get a wider perspective on particular issues that have arisen elsewhere. For example, a questionnaire might be used in order to gauge whether a new university online help service would be welcomed by students. This means you have a specific idea in mind and you want to check it with a broad group of people. This questionnaire could ask for impressions or opinions about current support services and whether the respondent is prepared to be interviewed further. The interview would allow you to catch things that you didn't have in your questionnaire, because with the questionnaire, you only get responses for what you put in it. So it doesn't allow you to be very adaptable. So a pro is it's very easy to collect lots of data, a large sample size from a lot of people, and then analyze quantitative data at large. The cons are survivor bias. So people that actually get through the questionnaire or respond to the questionnaire are the sample that you collect. And so you might lose some of those perspectives along the way, depending on the design of your questionnaire. And it's not very adaptable. You can ask open-ended questions, but you can only ask fixed questions. And there's like a little bit of adaptability you can have in the system, but it has to be preconceived ideas. You can't kind of get emergent ideas. Direct observation is another way. You can just look at users doing a task. In the requirements activity, observation of participants in their natural setting is used to understand the nature of the task and the context in which they are being performed. Sometimes observation is carried out by trained observers who record their findings and report them back to the design team. And sometimes the observation is carried out by or with a member of the design team. You can observe people in their natural habitat, so to speak, so in situ. This means that you go to their place of work or play or their home and you see them engage in their tasks in that setting. Or you can set up a lab environment to directly observe what people are doing. A pro of this is that it's very natural or controlled if it's in the lab. So you have control of the environment and you get to understand everything that's going on. You also get exactly what the person is doing. So that limited recall issue from interviews and also focus groups doesn't really come out. However, it's undirected. You can't put people into certain tasks or get them to do certain things. You can't query them. It is time consuming. You have to individually watch them. And you don't hear their inner thoughts, things that they might be able to express with an interview. Indirect observation is another approach to be able to get data from users. Diaries and interaction logging, so looking at logs of existing systems, are used less often within the requirements activity when a new product is under development. But if a product is being developed iteratively, if it already exists, or if it's evolving from an existing product, indirect observation and experience sampling are very valuable. Interaction logging together with sophisticated web analytics are particularly useful for improving websites. What this means is that you can collect lots of data. So again, you get this large sample size and it's directed. You could kind of present different tasks or kind of search those different tasks that people are doing. But it does require an existing system of some sort to be able to indirectly observe. It is often undirected. You can't directly show people things. So it's directed in that you can get a lot of data and then sort of query down to it, but it's undirected in that you can't deliberately prompt new things. And it's not as detailed. You're kind of inferring indirectly what the people you're observing are doing from these different traces and logs. The next two are very similar, so we're going to discuss them together. Studying documentation and researching different products is another way that you can collect a lot of information. Looking at similar products can help prompt requirements. For example, when developing an image editor for a mobile device, Kansas and Kinnunen in 2005 report that they looked at a PC image editing software in order to gain an understanding of the kinds of features and interaction that such a package might offer, especially if they're developing something similar. So when you're studying documentation of existing systems or requirements, this might be formal documentation. If you're trying to support something that has legal requirements, for example, you get lots of details. And so you have these very specific requirements that you can then roll into your own specification. But it's not directly from users. So the documentation would be from other engineers, other designers, or from policymakers. And so that documentation may not always translate into what the potential users need to accomplish their tasks. Researching similar products lets you learn from the competition, and there isn't a lot of data collection. You can go out and see what exists. So in a very quick survey of what already exists, you can kind of understand existing products and the tasks that they're supporting. And you can do some extra analysis there to understand those tasks. But this limits creativity. You'll be arriving at similar solutions that other people are, and it deals with existing problems. So it's not likely to find those tasks that aren't being supported unless you're very good at identifying the holes. But you still want to check with users at the end of the day. And that's where any one of these individual techniques can fall apart, is that it has these cons that lets you lose something. So let's talk about triangulation. Do you know what this means? In the context of gathering data, triangulation means using two or more complementary techniques to get a more comprehensive picture of the subject under observation. And so what I highly suggest you do when you're doing your project is you use at least two different techniques to be able to complement one another, a questionnaire and an interview, looking at existing products, but then also running a focus group. Whatever you're able to do to try and shore up those cons and have those pros work together.